welcome to the first and most likely a series of videos in which we're going to explore something about spirituality, awakening, and practice, and all that. And I'm going to introduce some material this evening I've never really talked about before. And I think this is going to be a really powerful session. So we started before talking about, I don't remember exactly what we were talking about, but it brought up this subject that I want to sort of introduce in a broad sense what we're talking about when we're talking about spiritual awakening. So that from our viewpoint and our understanding, consciousness is infinite. Consciousness is the most permanent, let's say, strata of our life that we have access to. The human brain, human body, the human nervous system, particularly the brain, isolates a small slice of consciousness and makes it available to us as an individual. I've heard scientists say that if you took all possible experience and stretch it out on a linear scale of 100 miles, what the human brain does is it picks up 6 inches out of that 100 miles. So that means we're limited to a very small bandwidth of consciousness. Even birds see things we don't see. Dogs hear things we don't hear. They say that shrimp can see 32 colors while we basically see three primary colors, while the shrimp sees 32. So we have a very narrow bandwidth of consciousness. And that's part of, I think, the pain of being human, is that we're crunched into a very limited reality. And here's the thing is that in the midst of being squeezed into a very narrow bandwidth of experience, a very tight limitation really from our true nature, we develop a system and strategy of how to survive this, how to deal with this, how to cope with it many times. And one of the things I want to talk about right now is something called brain bias. There's a bias in the brain called confirmation bias. That bias means that once we establish, and this is my version, I mean, I'm not a scientist and I haven't really read the science documents around this, but the confirmation bias works pretty much like this. At some point, as we go along from early childhood on into whenever it sort of peaks, maybe in their teens, maybe in their 20s, and it always continues to change a bit. But the confirmation bias says now that we've established a sense of safety, a sense of okayness, a sense of security, the brain is constantly scanning for anything that makes us feel unsafe. So the brain has evolved, according to the neuroscience, over millions of years to avoid uncertainty. And the confirmation bias works like this. When we encounter something that doesn't agree with our already assumed version of reality, the mind will actually find a way to generate a lie that confirms our prior bias, our prior idea and thoughts and beliefs about reality. Brain actually generates a lie. And when it generates that lie, it releases a chemical in the brain, and that chemical that gets released into the brain is equal in addictive power to cocaine. You'll get this flush of feeling okay. Suddenly you feel okay. You go from uncertainty to feeling okay as per that confirmation bias. So these are the kind of things that we're working with when we're exploring spirituality, which is about leaping out of that crunch of consciousness into a bigger consciousness, which is not relegated to the function of the brain. And that is one of the ways in which we start to test the waters of spiritual freedom. And at some point, as we touch that, we start to realize that there's actually a safety beyond the safety we've been living according to so far. But what we're doing is there has to be, I believe, a certain commitment to truth. A commitment to truth we can call spiritual seeking. And that is, the game here is to be willing to give up all the kind of prior beliefs and ideas, thoughts, attitudes that we've been living according to so far. Because truth is beyond that in most cases. I would say in all cases, but that, I don't want to make an absolute out of something that I don't know to be absolute. So if is anybody not following that, just raise a hand. Let's see if we want to explain it more, but I think we've explained it enough for now. So let's see, what do we do next here? The topic I want to talk about, the thing I want to bring up now, which I think will help bring this closer to the actual practice that I want to introduce, is what we call karma. And I want to talk about karma in a way that, this is new to me as I've discovered it. I've discovered it basically by working with people. So I want to talk about karma. This is something I've discovered. I mean, karma is, it's a word and has some concepts, and maybe we all think we know what it means, and maybe we do and maybe we don't. But here's what I want to explain something about karma. There are karmas that we take on that are optional. And I would say, let me explain how I see this optional karma coming into play. Let's say you're walking down the street, or let's say you're walking along the sidewalk, and you have a companion with you, and you're aware that your companion, let's say, is visually impaired. And you notice up ahead there's a lip in the concrete, you know, a tree root picked it up or something. And you don't tell your friend, just weren't thinking about that at the moment, and your friend trips and sustains an injury. And you conclude, oh, I did something wrong, I've caused pain to this person. Now, it's the conclusion that sets up the karma, not the act itself. And I'm not going to say in all cases, of course, that's not true, but in many cases, it's the conclusion we come to. Because here's the basis of what I'm saying. If you dig deep enough into reality, if you enter that field of pure consciousness deep enough, you will discover, I believe, as I have, that at that level, there's no rules. There is no rules because there's no structure to reality at that level. So in a way, because we are made of the creative power that we call the creator or the God. We don't like the word God, substitute another word. But that creative power is what we are made of. When God, in the sense that there is a creator or a God who created reality, there wasn't anything to build reality from except God's own material, the material of being, the material of God, which is consciousness and energy, from my viewpoint. So everything is constructed of that consciousness and energy, and that's going to be an important theme throughout this series. So that is relentlessly creative, that power or presence. Power is not exactly the right word, but we'll call it power for the sake of the conversation in English. But it is relentlessly creative, because whatever your reality is right now, whatever is happening in your reality, whatever you're feeling, thinking, your body, your environment, it's always new, it's always new, it's always new. Nothing stays the same. The sun itself someday will end its existence. So when And there's a way in which we were, let's say, introduced or indoctrinated, maybe a better word, into how to be humans. We were oftentimes punished and corrected in ways that probably were not optimal. I'm not saying it's bad or wrong, I don't have a judgment about it. But that then sets up this tendency to, when things happen around us, we're prone to leap to a conclusion that I caused this person to suffer, I caused this good, this bad. So here's my position, and some people argue about this, but so far as I've been able to tell so far, anything is caused by everything. Anything that happens, anything that comes into existence is caused by everything. The great, what was his name, Stephen Hawking, I think, he said it this way: if you want to invent, and if you want to create an apple pie from scratch, you have to reinvent the universe. Anything is caused by everything. As you deepen in this realization, this does not excuse you from not being attentive to your actions and your words and how you navigate life and how you interact with people. It should, in my opinion, it should actually bring you into greater sensitivity to how you're affecting people, not less. However, as you deepen in consciousness, you'll find that you begin to think, act, and navigate from silence, not from your preconceived notions of reality, of good and bad and all that. So this is where it gets to be a little, let's say, rich. But the more you can kind of bring yourself into alignment with what I'm going to call oftentimes pure source energy, the deepest creative aspect of your being, pure source energy, the more you can bring yourself into alignment with that, the less your life will be controlled by your unconscious thoughts, beliefs, attitude, and so on. So part of that, I believe, is starting to see that much of the negative karmic influence that we have operating in our lives is based on these times in our life when we came up with the thought, I caused this person suffering, or I caused a problem for this person. I think probably at this point, many or most people who would be seeing this would be familiar with near-death experiences. And I'm not saying that all near-death experiences are indicative of the other side. They may or may not be. But most people who go through some form of NDE will go through a life review. Their whole life goes before them in detail, complete. And along with that, they experience not only what they did and said, but how they impacted the people around them. So they feel what the other person felt. So that's part of how the karma gets, let's say, perpetuated. Now, there's a statement that is purportedly made by the Master Jesus that says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Now, personally, I don't think that's a very good interpretation of that statement, because you can think of many situations where that really wouldn't work. It just wouldn't work at all. What was his name, the comedian guy who was, had some problems with exposing himself to women. And chances are he was doing unto them what he wanted them to do unto him. So if it's a statement of truth, it would work in all situations, all situations, if it's truth. So I would say the better interpretation that would be begin to understand that whatever you do, you're doing to yourself only. So whatever your actions and words and frequency are generated in the world, you are experiencing it. You are the one who's going to experience it. Initially, you experience it through another person, unconsciously to you, but eventually you get to experience it directly, one way or the other. So then I think that's a better interpretation or understanding, and starting to get how karma works. Because once we arrive at a conclusion that I caused something in another person, until we're fully awakened, the karma works in such a way that if there's any sense of punishment, it would be me punishing myself. In my reality, there's no punitive God who's registering what people do and say and then punishes people accordingly. But that deeper sense of self, which is not awakened, the non-awakened spirit, then tends to take us into situations where we will experience the result. We can do that knowingly, we can do it unknowingly. When we do it unknowingly, it perpetuates karma. Now I'm going to give another example, which probably would be controversial. I didn't have some controversy, it might not be worthwhile. Now, according to some of the esoteric teachings I've read and heard, we go through a series of incarnations as a gender. Let's say I think the figures are something like we have about 10 incarnations as one gender, and then we switch genders. Now, let's say that you were living in a male body for 10 cycles, then you enter a female gender. Now, it's most likely that whatever actions you were generating towards the women in your life, now as a woman, you're going to be on the receiving end of those actions. I just think that's kind of how it works. And I think the reason it's valuable to see this is so that we can start to expand how we navigate our karmas. And so I have a little exercise here, which if you're willing to do, we're going to undertake now. So let's see, can we do this with eyes closed? I think let's do this with eyes closed. Just close your eyes and have the intention to connect your conscious mind with your spirit, with your higher self. And don't worry about what you're experiencing. This is just pure intention. You just have the intention to connect with that higher intelligence, the higher consciousness of your spirit. And higher than that is, we could say, your higher self. There are levels and strata of this. But we're going to imagine that we're standing in front of a let's say a veil. The veil is not made of anything. It's simply a partition that is absolutely porous. And in a moment, we're going to step through that veil. So here's the deal. When we step through that veil, on the other side is a place of releasing the negative karmic influence that we've taken on by making decisions in a lower state of consciousness. So the statement is, am I willing to release my negative karmic influence that I generated from a lower state of consciousness? Am I willing to completely release this? And that stepping through the veil is a signal, it is an indication, this is a bit of a ritual, that we are stepping into a total willingness to release and be freed from permanently the negative karmic influence that we took on from a lower state of consciousness. Now the invitation is just to step through that partition with the intention that you're releasing, letting go. All we can really do is be completely willing. The activity of this, the result of this is, we could say, up to grace. For us, it's about being willing. Okay, we can open our eyes now. So this can actually turn out to be more powerful than you think right now. Now, what may happen is if you're aware, if you understand what we're doing here, at some point in the next few days, few weeks, could be longer, that karmic cycle may show up. And you have taken this step. Now, the next thing is when it shows up, be aware and recall. I deleted this file. You know, on the computer screen, you delete something, then a little window comes. Are you sure you want to delete this? So if it shows up, just empower yourself to recognize that this is something I've already let go of. It's about you assuming power. It's not about somebody else controlling things for you. It's about taking that step of being an authority over your own existence and your own transition. Just notice, just be willing at least, and determine that I will notice this and I will continue to delete that tendency. Let's see, Ante, can you open the mics and let's see if we can get some feedback from that, how that is for people. So who wants to make a comment?
I talked for an hour. Allan, everything that you just said has been bubbling up in my awareness over the last several years. But you boiled it down and made it succinct. And I've been trying to find the pattern in some of this, and you've already got it.
Thanks.
This is blowing me away. Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else have a comment? And comments here, we're not relegating comments to positive comments. Whatever your experience is. This isn't about feeling good or being right. This is just about what's your experience.
Well, my perception when it ended was to just feel much lighter. I immediately felt lighter and a greater brightness around me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
I've begun to have some experience of this in terms of hearing this, this wasn't totally brand new for me.
Yeah.
It's recent for me.
Yeah.
And what I got from this was I really appreciate the language that you used, Allan. It's like, because I think what I can do is I can, once that stuff comes up, is to say something like, yeah, I've already deleted this, or I've already let go of this. Yeah. I can see myself having to do that repeatedly, possibly, which is okay. Yeah. But yeah, I definitely appreciate the language you used.
Oh, thanks.
That was helpful.
Anybody else?
It felt to me like there's an energetic signature of like my force coming against karma and like fixing it kind of forward in my life, like a lot of streams of that, and like that kind of just releasing. And then there's a lot of energy that it's like needs redirection into other modes.
Oh, great. Yeah, I love what you're saying. Yeah, that's a big part of what we're doing here, really. Is what we're going to be doing throughout this is taking energy and awareness that's tied up in conclusion, thoughts, attitudes, emotions, and so on, releasing it, teasing it apart, and then reallocating how it will function here on out. You know, it's like repurposing energy. So karma it's not just my karma. In some way, it's just soup. It's soup we live. And you could probably track some of it back to past lives. I'm sure you could, other lifetimes. You can track some of it back to your bloodline. And in India, they have names for all these different types of karma. Because you have your bloodline. You know, like I've had situations where I feel these energies of conflict, and I could like see one of my ancestors' face on it. It was that literal to me. So we, in some sense, what our ancestors didn't complete karmically, we're given that. So some of it, a lot of, so we're starting to like tease into this and digest it in a way. I think as a group, I think the ability to digest it and move through it is going to be even greater than doing it on our own or doing it, you know, in a private session. That's my sense, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this. That there's a kind of empowerment that we blend ourselves together here. So both that and the intention to blend ourselves together go hand in hand. Did anybody else have a comment on that? On the exercise? Yeah, I am.
Yeah, sit closer. Yeah, I found it really powerful. You know, I've had a lot of near-death type experiences through the toad medicine work that I was doing, and yeah, I can recognize that, and I notice all of that is true, and then I can feel around the karma, like there's, you know, there's energetic repercussions of actions like in my body, and in a way like I can step beyond that. But then I notice there's a bit of disbelief because the energetic imprint is still there, and I do have a sense of like knowing, like, oh yeah, like there's like this remembrance and this knowing that I am beyond it, or that I have let it go, or that I have deleted it.
Yeah.
And so I do feel empowered in that, and in a way, and I'm also just aware of, you know, just the imprints in my body, and I'm curious, you know, if I, you know, to really bring that perspective that you're offering, you know, as things arise coming forward.
Okay, good.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else?
Allan, for me, the image of the veil is one that's been coming up for me repeatedly in visions, and I was thrilled to hear that. As Elliot said, the language, the way you're explaining this is so immediate and accessible and ties to my experience. It's
Good. All right. So the part about anything is caused by everything. The next thing I want to talk about, which I don't think we'll do an exercise with right now, well, we will sort of, is that as a human, so yeah, let me just explain this like cosmology as I see it. Now I'm not presenting this as an absolute, I don't need you to believe this. It's not about believing it or taking it on as, it's a step into a more expanded version of who and what we are. Because I believe we do need some kind of, whether it's absolutely true or not, it's like a higher concept. So my cosmology is about that. It's about exploring at least the possibility of a higher concept or a greater explanation of our existence. So from my perspective, you could say the Godhead, or pure source energy, and that congeals a bit into what I call the matrix of souls. Now in that matrix of souls, there's no possibility of the soul being separate or experiencing separateness. but there's a bit of a congealing from that into a certain unique capacity of each soul. But still, there doesn't mean separation. Just like if you look at your hand, you know, your hand, each of the fingers, you've got 5 fingers and they're all very different. And they need to be unique in order for the hand to have maximum functionality. But they're not separate in any way. So the uniqueness of the soul does not imply separation except to some strange beliefs that the human mind has come up with. So from that then, in my perspective, step down from the uniqueness of the soul into what I call spirit. Now, different people use this language differently. This is just the way I use the language. Then the spirit is the energy. The spirit, you could say, is the energy of the soul, which steps down and congeals another step, and there may be various strata in between. This is kind of a general schematic. Steps down then are into the condensation of into the human form. So then it's the clarity and sanctity of the spirit that generates the body. So wherever within the spirit body, and I have an exercise on YouTube video about how to directly notice your spirit body or your energy body. And we can, I think we can type that in later for people who want to just say, go through that exercise so you can start to kind of sense what we mean by spirit body or energy body. It's not difficult at all to do that, but I'm not going to do it here because we already have a video on YouTube how to do that. So the work of, let's say the work of yoga, and the reason that I recommend yoga practices and do some myself is to help clear up that energy body. And the energy work that I do with people individually is about cleaning or purifying or developing strength in the spirit body or energy body. So as the spirit or energy body becomes cleaner and purer and stronger, that manifests into the human body then. Because that's essential to the operation of the human body. And when the human body starts to fall away or does fall away, that's the next layer that's going to be there for most people. Maybe not in higher states of realization, that's another conversation. So that means that each person has a certain karmic pattern, a certain destiny. And also, more important than that, is each person has a sovereignty. So the sovereignty starts at the Godhead and comes right into their human reality. So there's a sovereignty in each person. So when you're walking on the sidewalk with your friend and your friend trips and falls and you say, oh, I've done harm to this person, that is actually a violation of their sovereignty. It's not that you don't examine your motives. It's very important that we be aware of our motives. You may find that you had a motive, you did have a motive to actually see that person be harmed. That's the inner work, is also noticing your motives, being aware of your motives, and learning to regulate your motives. There's this great, and I'm terrible at quoting scriptures, but there's this part in the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna and Arjuna are talking, and Krishna is explaining to Arjuna that he needs to go into the battle. That's his dharma, that's his destiny, to go into the battle and fight this war. He's going to have to kill his relatives, and he just doesn't want to do it. Krishna says something very important. He says, Arjuna, whatever you do with no malice in your heart, you do not incur karma. So that's why it's important to be aware of your motives, be clear about your motives, but at the same time, give up this idea or this habituated way of thinking that we can control somebody else's fate, because they are a sovereign being. They're in charge of their own fate. So if your friend fell and incurred an injury, that belongs to them. It doesn't belong to you. You didn't cause it. It doesn't mean that's not a free ticket to do anything you feel like doing. It is not at all. In fact, I would say it becomes, as you come higher into this frequency of awakening, the way gets, the leeway gets narrowed down. You actually have less of that kind of freedom and more of another kind of freedom. So we want to go towards that higher freedom, which is higher knowledge, higher, closer proximity to truth, and not be so bound up with our, the whole causation thing that we get caught up in. And I'm not going to go into any kind of debate about whether there's causation or not. It's just not necessary for what we're doing here. I think now, let's see, let me check the time. We're committed to ending here in about 30 minutes. And anybody afterwards wants to stay on and have questions, we can do that. I think we're going to move into the practice now that's, I think, vital to what I teach. This is a meditation type practice, and I'll explain more later. My suggestions, I don't know if I would say guidelines, but suggestions on this practice. And I'm probably going to have a number of quotes from different masters to help bring clarity to why this is, I consider, essential. I'm not saying it's better than any other practice, it's just what I do and what I teach and what I found to be helpful. So let's just close our eyes. And now it may be helpful if you take a few deep breaths to relax. It's not a big deal, deep breaths, just breathe in a little deeper, a little faster, and then breathe out, slowly breathe out, and as you breathe out, relax. A little deeper in, a little faster in. Slowly breathe out and relax. And the second time, a little deeper in, a little slower, a little faster, a little deeper in. Breathe out very slowly and relax. And a third time, a little deeper in, a little faster. Breathe out very slowly and totally relax. And now just notice that you can easily, effortlessly move your attention. Let's say direct your attention to the bottoms of your feet. Your feet were there all along, probably weren't paying attention to them, but as soon as you direct your attention there, you start to notice a sensation. Might be tingling or something in the bottoms of your feet. And just move your attention, let's say, to your elbows, the skin on the pointed part of your elbows. First the left side, then the right side. And turn your attention to, let's say, the back side of your ears, the skin on the back side of your ears. And you do this on your own, which I hope you will. You can just exercise your attention to whatever you want. Your breath, skin between your fingers. But for now, this part of the exercise is just to get in touch with your ability to effortlessly direct your attention. And once you do that, the next step is direct your attention to the most intimate sense of yourself as I. Could be sense me, could be sense I'm like I. Just direct your attention to this felt sense of I. It's not the thought, so keep it preferably in the chest area so you it's not the thought of I, the feeling sense of yourself as I. And don't try to do it right. You're not looking for something that happened in another meditation or something written in a book. Just being curious. Just direct your attention to the felt sense of yourself as I, and notice what you notice. Now, when they open up the microphones, and let's see, what we're going to do now is we're going to enter into a kind of group experience of this inner sense of I. So just whatever you're noticing, just say what you're noticing. Can somebody speak what you're noticing?
Alan, I've been working with I recently, and um, it seems to resonate for me. It makes more sense. It's for me. It's the initial impulse toward asserting one's own existence. And it's completely redundant and unnecessary, but only until after it's stated or after it's felt. The assertion of I noticing my I-ness, or I get it's an image and kind of a physical sensation of a being breaking through and spreading its arms somehow and saying, I'm here, this is me, this is, I assert that I exist.
Anybody else?
I get a sense of like an orb of space that's not really confined, but something about it's located here, but it's also everywhere, and that space it's like one space within the whole, but it's like that's where the awareness that inhabits this being is emerging from.
And so as people are sharing what they're noticing in this space of felt sense of I, lean into feeling what they feel. And we'll see what we discover. Who else?
I was at a retreat a week ago, and what came to me in the retreat, in the meditation, was, I love you, Elliot. And it came to me in this natural way that I never experienced before. And it came back to me as we were doing what we were just doing.
I can feel that.
I feel a few things. There's a feeling in some sensations in the body that are going on at the same time, but the I feeling is very difficult for me to put into words. It seems like any word I put to it just it doesn't do the job. So, but it's, and even the word peace, but spaciousness, but that it, you know, it's,
Anybody else?
I get this sense of a pulsing, bright fullness, but it's within some great immensity that's also beyond it, which doesn't seem to be the eye. So it's a presence within something greater.
That's great, Jack.
Just when you said that, Jack, that's pretty much like exactly my experience. I'm very aware of like the eye and the heart and the core of everything, and there is this vibrant pulsing. And I can't really tell if the eye is pulsing. You know, there's kind of like, I don't really care either, but you know, there's like an intimacy of like this silence and the pulsing, and it just feels really centered, like within my core. Yeah.
Anybody else wants to speak what you're experiencing, what you notice?
This is Tom. Can you hear me?
Yeah. If you could speak a little louder, would be good. You might move your mic closer.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah,
Hello?
go ahead.
Yeah, I focused in my chest, and I did get a sense of I. Kind of a formless, wordless, I don't know, presence or something. But I don't know. It when I close my eyes and focus inward like that, it just seems like there's so much space. Like the space of the chest and the torso doesn't look like very much, but it's vast. Seems vast when you look inside like that.
Yeah, I can tell you're speaking from it. I feel it's like there's, for me, there's like when you speak from that, as I'm feeling you speaking from it, I can feel this expansion. And when I feel in that expansion, there's a joyful quality to it. There's a sweet joyousness to that expansion as I'm tuning into what you're feeling and speaking. Anybody else? And so let's just close your eyes again and just come back to that felt sense of I in the chest area. And now add I am. Add am to the I and just notice what happens. Just notice. And now add your name. I am Allan, I am whatever your name is. Just then notice what happens. Okay, let's open our eyes now and share a bit what happened then when we do that. What do you notice?
For me, each time there was a little bit of tension and fear, that
Yeah.
came up, especially with a little bit of tension with the M, and then with the odd A, it was like, oh no.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going down, going down to earth. You can actually feel, or I can, you can feel it going into the tension and the limitation. Yeah. Anybody else notice that?
I did.
Yeah.
I fear was what showed up for me too a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other comments on that part of it?
Yeah,
I
it
had a
seemed
good few.
it seemed like there was less peace, more energy,
Yeah.
more focused in the head and the heart.
Yeah.
I want to hear what Lauren has to say.
Yeah.
I could feel the I am. It's conditioned with a sense of participating as relative to this life, and then I could feel the Lauren. I could feel the like the framings of all the projects and stories kind of come in just as like energetic streams kind of flowing through that bigger I. Felt more dense, weighty.
More dense.
I think that
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
So there's a statement presumably made by the Master Jesus that said, I am the way, the truth, and the light. No man cometh unto the Father except through me. What if what he really meant was the sense of I within yourself is the way to the great I, the great Father, the great consciousness, and that you just can't get there unless you go through your own felt sense of existing as a me or an I? What if that's what he was really talking about? Because if you listen and look at the very words, there's nowhere in that statement that he says, I am a 32-year-old Jewish human. It doesn't say anything about being a human, about his name. It doesn't say any of that. He says, I, period, am the way. No man means the individual, the identity, comes into this great I except through his own felt sense of self as me or I. So that's how I interpret his teaching. And that's how I experience it. And I wanted to make this very clear. This is not an I am practice. This is not about I am. But I think if you sit with the I am and you kind of go back and forth, you'll notice that when you add am to the I, it becomes like a magnet that wants to attract all these other things. It's like once you add am, there's like this force that's like, okay, what am I? What am I? Whereas when it's pure I, it has a purity and a sanctity. And all the, of course not all, but a primary question of spirituality is, who am I? What am I? And what we're doing with this practice is we're just paying attention to this I. That's all. Giving it attention. Because attention is like a garden hose through which consciousness is directed. And anything you pay attention to, you're going to come to understand whatever you pay attention to more. You know, when I had one of my youngest grandchild, my granddaughter, my youngest one, lived with me for a while, and I would just spend a lot of time just paying attention to her, just curious, just watching. And I learned a lot about myself, about how consciousness comes in and takes on identity. Just paying attention. Some of you may have heard of Sadhguru Jagi Vasudev, Sadhguru is commonly called. And he tells the story of when his mother sent him off to school, and she said, now you pay attention to the teacher. And he said he would sit there and just pay strict attention to the teacher. He didn't listen to what the teacher was talking. And he said it would come to the point he hears sounds, but he didn't even know the words. He was just paying attention to the teacher. He said he did this to the point where he came to understand everything about that man. He knew all his past lives, everything in his present, he even knew his future, just by paying attention. So if, in my teaching and way, if you want to know yourself, give that attention to yourself. And I'm saying, keep it in the chest area. The reason I'm saying that is because this is not an I thought. It's not the thought of I. It's different than that. It's the feeling sense of I. And that feeling sense, I believe, is primal. It comes before you know your name, before you even know you have a name or should have a name. And one day, we were out by a lake here in New Jersey just to relax and enjoy. And I was sitting on a rock right at the edge of the water, and it was just very quiet. And a crow came, and Crow was sitting up in the tree. And he started talking, and I thought, well, you know, when I'm kind of get out in nature, which is, of course, this lake was man-made, but the more deeper I'm in nature, the more I kind of tune to what's happening in the natural world. So I'm just listening to the crow, and I'm listening with my body, just curious, what is the crow talking? What is he saying? What's he communicating? And it started to translate in my mind as the crow saying, I am here, I am here. I am. I mean, so that's what I was saying, I am here. And I'm like, why would a crow be saying I'm here? This doesn't make sense. I must be, then I started to think maybe I'm wrong or something. But within, I would say 2 to 3 minutes, another crow came and joined this crow, and they flew off together. So even the animal has this I sense. I don't know about trees and stones. I haven't talked to them yet. But this is what I'm pointing at. There's something about it that's principle, that's prime. And I would suggest you do the practice, but don't look for something. Don't look for whatever any other teacher said about it, because the purpose of spiritual practice is to get beyond what the mind knows, what we believe, what we think. This is the quest for truth. This is not a quest for duplicating somebody else's realization. And we'll go into some more, as we go along, we'll go into some more quotes from hopefully other teachers and masters about this. So personally, we didn't record the introduction to this. I wish we had, but this started to unfold in me probably 5 or 6 years ago. I went through a kind of dramatic shift in 1992, in which my sense of self just was completely, it just vanished. I had no sense of personal self and individual. It was just gone, which got me in a lot of trouble with my family and close friends. But by God's grace, I managed to stay out of an institution or off medications. Not that there's anything wrong with medications and institutions, but that wasn't my preference. And then I spent about 8 to 10 years reading everything that I could find about this experience, particularly the work of Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta, a few others. And I practiced pretty intensely the teachings of Ramana around the most promoted way of this inquiry was to ask, who am I? But I'd like you just to notice something very simple. Let me ask you a question like, where is your right hand? And how does that question impact? Just notice when I ask, where's your right hand? How does that impact you? Now let me say, pay attention to your right hand. Can you feel the difference in that? Yeah. Like get a comment from somebody. You can make a distinction between asking a question and directing attention.
Yeah, it's like, where's your right hand? It's a known thing, so I'm referencing memory or knowledge, and pay attention to your right hand is just directly experiencing it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Openly.
Yeah. Another comment about it.
What happened for me was, it's like when you asked the question, where is my right hand? It was like it came from my brain.
Yeah.
And then when you said, pay attention to your right hand, it was a felt sense.
Yeah, bingo, that's it. Yeah. Yeah. And for me, when I ask the question, it's like, what? So the teaching is that only you, you are yourself. You don't have to do something to be yourself, but we paid attention to everything else except ourselves. Those of you who have grandchildren, I know there's some people here with grandchildren. Go to visit the grandchildren, what happens? They run and show some new toy. Watch me do this. Look at me. Watch me. And there's a way in which we all are still children wanting attention. And we give attention to everything else and everyone else kind of randomly, or do all kinds of sometimes crazy things we do to try to get attention. This is so simple and so dear and so easy, really. Just turn the attention back to yourself as I. And if you ask anybody about themselves, typically the person will point to their chest. They don't point to through their head. They just say, I'm here, and point to their chest. So there's a way in which we just instinctively know that deepest, purest sense of self is it has something to do with the chest. And just like you said, about it's a feeling sense, it's not a thought. Now this is kind of where I've come to with the teachings of Ramana and Nisargadatta. And I'm not being critical of anybody else's interpretation of their teaching. I don't make any claims about being in their lineage. It's not like that. This is just the work I've done and discovered and teach, and hey, it's true. But I can say that it has been profoundly beneficial to me. You have anything to add, Adi? I mean, Adi's been working with this quite a while. What's been your experience of it? I know that one time you were talking about being down in Manhattan, walking around.
Experience with the eye.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's now it's like the how can I explain it? It's like everything just coming back to, you know, I'm walking in the city and then I'll notice, oh, all the attention is going out there.
Yeah.
And just that noticing, then the little switch happens, and it just very subtly, you know, I don't even say, well, you know, consciously say, well, I'm going to put attention on my eye. It's just a little shift.
Yeah.
And everything just naturally putting the attention here, everything just, you know, just become very peaceful, and I'm here, and here as I don't know what, you know, it's you know, it's just very, it becomes a very peaceful and very very normal sort of thing, you know. But it's not like some far out sort of thing. But in that normal and the simplicity of it is, for me, it's like there's something extraordinary about it as well.
Yeah.
It's like a little bit of a paradox there.
It sounds great to me. You have any comment on this, Aaron? No, I know I taught this to Aaron quite a while ago, and he's practiced it some.
Yeah, what I notice and what I'm reminded of just in it now is when anything is added to the eye, like I notice like then it reinforces like I'm looking for something that I don't have, or that I'm just kind of slightly outside myself. And that anchoring back in the feeling I, like there's nothing, it's just, that's it. It's like there's no looking.
Yeah.
And I find that to be like profoundly.
You just gave a very clear description of non-attachment.
Yeah.
That was beautiful. Vairagya is called. So I think that's it's time to close. So I hope you will engage in the practice. Like I said, I do it. I think I said this anyhow. I do it as a pretty. I don't. I'd like to say discipline, but I don't have that much discipline. But I do it regularly every morning as a practice. If you're just completely adverse to practice, then just do it occasionally during the day. Maybe there's an app you could get to ring, buzz or ring your phone, say every 30 minutes, and just gently turn your attention back to that sense of self as I, feeling sense of I. So I'll leave that up to you. And if there's anything that we can do to support you, let me know. But my preference would be you dedicate a few minutes in the morning or any other time, and you sit and do it. Now, if you're doing another practice, another meditation, sit and just kind of go back and forth and determine for yourself. So I've been doing some form of meditation practice now for 45 to 50 years. So when this first started to unfold in me, one day I just sat and I would go back and forth, and it was just like, when I come to the eye, it was just like, whew. When I go to the other practice, there was a slight thing, was subtle, but there was a very distinct difference for me. And I knew this eye practice was where I was being directed, or where I was better suited for my development.